Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the University of Glasgow, can I warmly welcome you all to this evening's Hustings event. My name is Martin Hendry, and I'm Clerk of Senate and Vice Principal of the University and Returning Officer for the 2024 rectorial election. I would like to thank the candidates and their supporters, and most importantly, our audience joining online for their engagement and their participation this evening. I trust that we will have a constructive and informative debate, and I look forward to following the discussions on our YouTube live stream. Before we begin, I would like to briefly set some context for the election and the role of the Rector. Firstly, let me note that by standing for election, all candidates have agreed to abide by the published election rules. These rules include the following statements: that candidates and their proposers shall be responsible for their election campaign and the conduct of their campaign team members, and that candidates and their campaign teams are expected to run responsible campaigns which respect the rights of other candidates and others in the university and the local community. At the candidate briefing on 23rd of January, all candidate teams were briefed that campaigning must adhere to the university's values and policies, and that campaigns should be positive in their nature and should be based on the merits of the manifestos and qualifications of the candidates. All candidates have also agreed that, if elected, they will abide by Rule 2.3, which states that, as an ex officio member of the University Court, the Rector must agree to the Code of Conduct for members of court, and as such, endorse the 9 principles of public life in Scotland, set out in the Ethical Standards in Public Life, etc. Scotland Act 2000. The university is a regulated charity, and the members of court act as charity trustees. Scotland's charity regulator requires trustees to be fully independent in their decision-making, and that any decisions taken by trustees relate solely to matters relevant to the charity, i.e. the university. Further details of the expectations on members of court are set out clearly in the university's court's Code of Conduct. Amongst other things, the Code of Conduct requires members of court to declare any personal or business interest which may conflict with members' responsibilities to the university. Similarly, members of court who campaign on particular issues in their roles outside of the university would need to declare this interest where decisions relate to these issues. Court will then take a view on where a member's external interests require them to be excluded from specific decision-making. And so, without further ado, let me invite our SRC President, Hailie Pendleton, to introduce and convene this evening's hustings. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, everyone. I'm Hailie Pendleton. I'm the current president of the Students' Representative Council here at the University of Glasgow. The SRC is the elected representative body that exists to provide student representation at all levels of the university. Although the Rector role is separate to our structure, we share the common goal of championing the priorities and needs of the student community and challenging the university to prioritise its students, bringing an independent perspective as we do. With this in mind, I'm delighted to be here to chair the Rector Hustings. Tonight, we'll be joined by 3 of the candidates running for the position of Rector: Dr. Abu-Sittah, Paul Sweeney MSP, and Susie McCabe. Dr. Abu-Sittah has been delayed and will join soon, and Lady Rita has opted to send a spokesperson in her place in the form of Joseph. You'll hear from each of the candidates individually with their opening statements, following which we will have our first round of questioning, focusing on general questions for the candidates. Then, after a short break, we'll ask some individual questions to the candidates and hear their closing remarks. If you've got questions yourselves for the candidates, the form will remain open throughout the evening, and our comms team will be monitoring this throughout. Your name will be attached to your question, so please specify if you wish to remain anonymous. That's everything from me, other than to wish our candidates luck, and we'll kick off with our opening remarks. Each candidate has 3 minutes, and we'll start with Paul Sweeney, MSP. I'm so sorry, Paul. I think you're muted. Would you be able to unmute yourself?
Sorry. I thought you were doing that.
Very sorry. Okay,
Always.
just whenever you're ready.
Okay, so thank you to the SRC President, thank you to the Clerk of Senate for your opening remarks this evening, and thank you to all the other candidates here tonight, the students who nominated me and the audience for joining us here tonight. Students need an active working rector more than ever. They need a rector with a track record of delivering economic and social justice in Glasgow. I've represented Glasgow in both the UK and Scottish Parliaments over the last 7 years, and in that time, I've led a number of high-profile and successful campaigns, including the campaign to introduce an overdose prevention centre in Glasgow to halt the rise in drug-related deaths in Glasgow, which we have seen have risen already in the last year by a shocking amount. I led the successful campaign to keep Denniston Housing Association community-owned earlier this year and out of the hands of profiteering landlords. I also successfully pushed to bring about free bus travel for people seeking asylum in our city, a quick way to mitigate the impacts of the Home Office policies that stop people seeking asylum from gaining employment, and also have supported the successful Grades Not Visas campaign to extend SAS funding to people seeking asylum. Indeed, there are several students at the University of Glasgow today because of the campaigns I led to stop their deportation. Student welfare and prospects ought to be the #1 concern of university management. My offer to students is to be a rector that makes sure that your voice is always heard loudly and clearly on the university court and with management at all levels. For the last 3 years, thankfully, students have not felt like the rector has been there for them. Most aren't even aware of the role, and I want to change that. It's often said that there is no job description for a rector. It is what you make of it. I happen to disagree. The role is there to protect and advocate for the common interests of the entire student body. We know that when a rector is present and active on campus and is speaking out for the interests of the students, positive changes happen. I was a working class home undergraduate student here at the University of Glasgow, where the late Charles Kennedy was rector, and he put in the hard graft and he used the platform to speak up for the students with a united voice, and that is what the role of rector should be. It is not an honorary title, because at present students are facing several pressing issues. There is a housing emergency in Glasgow and students are bearing the brunt of it. More than 1 in 10 students have faced homelessness during their studies, and over a third of students at some point have been unable to pay their rent. Industrial disputes continue to impact on teaching. For too long, students and university workers have been pitted against each other. I want to see student and staff solidarity deepen, and I would use the position of rector to unite workers and students in pursuit of better working conditions and pay settlements. A priority for me would also be to amplify student wellbeing concerns. I will continue to campaign against cuts to student mental health services and look to strengthen the widening participation scheme for people seeking asylum and refugee students. I'm standing to be rector fundamentally because I know what the role can do for the student body when the rector.
Paul, if I could ask you to stop, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Paul. Next, we'll hear from Susie. Susie, just let me know when you're ready for me to start the timer.
All good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Susie McCabe, and I'm a working class Glaswegian who's the only non-academic running for rector. While I'm proud to have one of the top 100 universities in the world in my home city, I still think there's far more to be done to support you as a cohort. The barriers that so many marginalised communities face within the university is nothing short of scandalous. I've spent the past 4 weeks in and around the university and talking to many of you, and as both a woman and a lesbian, I understand the fears that many of you have around safety, homophobia, misogyny and violence. No matter your background, you'll be experiencing difficulties throughout your academic journey. And I am here to say to you, I see you, I hear you, and I want to be your voice. You're the post-pandemic cohort, and as such, you require more support than ever. It is shameful how many of you feel that academia has turned a blind eye to the struggles that you have. Over the last 3 years, you've had an anonymous rector who has achieved next to nothing in your name. I live in Glasgow, I work in Glasgow, I work when you work. I'm available during the day. I can be in and around the university. You'll see me every month at surgeries, and you'll see me in and around the university, whether that be having a coffee in the James McCune Smith or just walking around the campus. And I would like to think, if I should be rector, that you can come up and speak to me. I would also like to touch on what's in all our minds presently, Israel and Palestine conflict. I have always and will continue to support a free Palestine. As many of you know, my podcast partner, Frankie Boyle, and a friend of mine has long supported free Palestine, and I have supported him in that. What's happening today in Palestine is nothing short of genocide, and the reactions of the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, and the West in general has been nothing short of disgusting. I am all about the ceasefire, and how we've not called for it is a disgrace. The university needs to extract itself from weapons and fossil fuels and have nothing to do with conflict. This is your future, and this is your world, and this is your money that's going towards these things. And I, as rector, would encourage this investment within those industries. In closing, the main reason I'm running is because I can relate to many of the barriers that you face. I've faced them too, whether it's been part of the LGBT community, and that's LGBT, being a woman or being working class. I have struggled at times, and I have always been vocal in my support for my community. It's very easy to sleep with people of the same gender as you and not be vocal, but it's more important than ever during these culture wars that they are vocal. And I want you to walk about the campus and see someone like me, a little non-university educated lesbian, to know that you deserve to be your place on that campus. We can see what's happening. I'm a well-read, intelligent and thoughtful person, but yet...
That's your time, Susie.
Oh.
You almost had it there, but...
Almost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll move over to Joseph, who's here on behalf of Lady Ray. So Joseph, just let me know when you're good.
Yeah, I'm good to go now. So
Brilliant.
Yeah, of course, I'm Joseph. I'm not Lady Ray myself. Unfortunately, due to her role as a judge, she was unfortunately unable to attend this evening. But hopefully I can put your mind at ease that she'll be able to continue the great job that she's already been doing. Lady Ray has been privileged to have been the rector of this prestigious university for the past 3 years. And she has said that it has been an honour for her to represent us, the students. She did start at a time of particular difficulty when COVID restrictions that we can all remember were just being relaxed, and to some extent, areas of society were just opening up. She found it importantly that this was a difficult time for us, the students. Engagement was not as it could be at the present. But be that as it may, she strived to achieve over this period of her tenure and tried to assist students at any possible point in which she could. And she experienced these students hands-on through both phone calls, emails, and her successful surgeries. She dealt with a large number of issues, and she met students on and off campus and was able to meet any student who wished that they could attend. She has developed a great working relationship with the university and has been able to be listened to by those who can make real change. She has consistently been directed to the right person and now is able to provide excellent support to students when they need it and what they need it for. When she started, she wanted to work with the university on behalf of the students, and that has been her goal throughout. This is what she has tried to do. She has faced criticism, though, unfortunately, and has been labelled a missing rector, which is totally incorrect. And the university even confirmed this in a public statement. She has never sought headlines and simply got on with the job of supporting students who approached her. She, if elected, will continue to follow this course, and she's not going to make any false promises. She will listen to the students and have regard the views to take these into the accounts of the SRC. It is in Lady Ray's view that the rector should not be a political role. The role is to represent all students at the university, no matter their race, no matter their gender, no matter how they identify themselves as. She should not represent one group, one idea, one ideology, but she should support all of us to create the best university possible. I'd like to make a few points on Lady Ray's main two proposals. Firstly is her duty at winding participation and gender equality. Lady Ray, throughout her career, has strived and broken through barriers that were put in front of her. She is now at the top of her profession in a role that had not been seen. Up until her election in 2021, there had never been a working female rector at this university, and her role has continued in this way. She'd also like to highlight the key interests of student safety and how she would like to help support the students, as she has done through these past 3 years, to even more better first-hand knowledge of the risks that they will face while on campus, and hopefully to mitigate these as best possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, and you kept to time. Always a bonus. I believe we've got Doncha with us on behalf of the Abu-Sittah campaign. Is that right? Yeah, I can see you now on the screen. So I'll let you make some opening remarks if that's all good, just when you're ready.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me, and apologies that Dr. Abu-Sittah isn't with us right now. He should be here soon, but that's kind of the nature when you're a surgeon, like sometimes things come up in the last minute and you can't pull out them. So I would just like to start by saying that Ghassan Abu-Sittah's candidacy, and in his candidacy, we've got someone who understands the fundamental root causes of the issues that we face as students. He understands that the main cause lies with the commodification of university education. He understands that currently we are unfortunately seeing education sold as for profit rather than for our needs as students, which is why he is so committed to commit to divestment, and also as the main policy. And he understands the issues of student housing, as he has said in interviews with university press, with the national press, and also social media videos as well. We've got a unique opportunity as students to not only elect a symbolic political vote in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but also a working rector. To speak to Ghassan's character, because I can't speak on his behalf 100%, but to speak to his character, this is someone who has been to at least 7 war zones throughout his life completely voluntarily. His dedication to the cause and to humanity is absolutely unquestionable, as will be his commitment to students if he is elected, and we hope he is elected. This is the way that we can actually address and have a proper voice representing students who isn't attached to any other political campaigns or political offices, who is actually was a student himself and has been involved in student activism in the city and recognizes the city's internationalist and anti-imperialist past, present, and future. So within that, I would highly encourage you all to vote for Ghassan and to put him as his #1 preference, because he is truly someone that understands the fundamentals of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Doncho, and thank you to all of you for your opening remarks. We'll start with some questions that will go to all of you. I'll start with some pretty simple ones. Our first one is, as Rector, there's an expectation of you to bring student concerns to the higher university levels. Considering that all of you have other responsibilities, how do you plan on maintaining a constant presence on the campuses of the university, not just our Gilmore Hill campus, throughout your 4 years as Rector? And I'll come to Susie first. I think you're muted, Susie.
Oh,
I should say to all the candidates, actually, I think we're having issues with manually unmuting, so if you could just do it yourselves, that would be brilliant.
cool. So I live in Glasgow. I believe that the job of Rector is really to be a conduit between the students and the university management. It's very simple for me. I can spend time at the university. I can bring my work to the university. I need a laptop, a pad, a pen, a phone. That's it. So there's really no issue for me gaining access to the university, being visible around the campus, being out talking to students. I've spent the past 4 weeks going in and around it, and I've learned a lot. I've spent time also with some of the staff, some of the support staff, and some of the lecturing staff to find out what's going on. And I think to try and be more of a cohesive force as Rector, you've got to be there and you've got to be visible. Yeah, I have other commitments, as does everyone else, but the fact of the matter is I stay 10 minutes from the university. I'm not aligned politically. I've never been a member of a political party. And ultimately, I believe that this generation of students have had it harder than any post-war generation in Britain, and they need somebody who has challenged the status quo their entire life. And let me tell you, as a working class lesbian who was brought up a Roman Catholic, I have done nothing but challenge the status quo, whether that be in stand-up comedy or working in construction for 15 years or working in a gay bar during the Section 28 campaign.
Thank you, Susie. I'll come to you next, Paul.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty obvious role of the Rector to be on campus and present. I mentioned, obviously, Charles Kennedy has been a big inspiration in how he conducted himself in the role. Also, I think Amar Anwar was a good example of how you go about the job well and advocate on behalf of student interests. Already, been on campus regularly. I'm no stranger to being on campus. I've been on campus several times in the last few weeks. It's a regular occurrence. After I graduated in 2011, I was on the board of management at the Glasgow University Union. Was involved in the campaign to save the Hive and reconstruct the Hive into the venue as now. And, you know, I've never really been disengaged from the university ever since I graduated. So for me, as a parliamentarian representing constituents in Glasgow, which all students at the university are, if they're in Glasgow, you know, it's the Venn diagram's a circle, really. You know, I'm around on campus and present. I do surgeries locally. I'm always available regularly on campus to attend events. Was up at the university just a couple of weeks ago speaking to the Estates Department about, for example, looking at redundant buildings that could be turned into student accommodation. You know, these are all things that I kind of do anyway. So, you know, it doesn't really faze me in that sense. You know, it's something that I'm really eager to try and do. I really get a sense of satisfaction out of advocating on behalf of people, particularly students, you know, people who are subject to power structures which they find difficult to overcome. You know, that's what I really enjoy doing for people. I mentioned some of the examples for people seeking asylum, for example, that in my opening remarks. So for me, it goes with the territory, and I think it's the difference a rector can make. We're quite privileged at Glasgow that we're a university that has a rector and that kind of symbolic figure, but they can really do a great job for the people of the campus and the university community, and that's what I'd like to try and do.
Thank you for that, Paul. I'll come to Joseph and then Doncho. Obviously, I appreciate that you're here on behalf of the candidate. So I guess we're just asking you how the candidate expects to engage with the students and with student life at the university.
Yeah, on Lily Ray's behalf, she'll continue the work that she's already done. She's been quite active in the small stuff, in the stuff that is not like clashing radars. You're not going to see her walking down streets, campaigning, fighting for things, but she'll do that. The small work that actually needs done. She'll be helping the students. She's responded to emails, being on campus when needed. She's made multiple attempts and multiple trips to the Dumfries campus, making them feel more included in the university life. It's often feel a bit left out, even though they're only a bit down the road. And she will continue with the working relationship she currently has with the university management. She's been with them for 3 years. She's familiar with how they work. She's familiar with how she can phrase things to get stuff done. And she knows the correct channels so that she can work through and that she will not be a barrier to change, instead to help to create change and be a presence on campus like she's been for the past 3 years.
Thank you, Joseph. And Doncho?
Okay. Thank you. I'd just like to say he's already started engaging with students. Dr. Ghassan was at the university last Friday, helping us canvass along, and he was out talking to students already, asking them about their concerns. So he is doing that already, and he even met with the Jewish Society as well to discuss and come to terms with a way of being able to fight both the scourge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, which is two sides of the same coin. And we've also managed to, his candidacy has managed to pack a lecture theatre with over 200 students that came to listen to him talk. So I think we've got someone who is both willing to reach out to people on campus and be up here however long it takes, and also someone that students can recognize and that they can come to and feel like they can actually be heard as well.
Thank you all for your answers to that question. I suppose as a follow-up, we've had a question in from a student who's asking how you plan to represent the students on our other campuses. So in Scotland, that's our Dumfries and Garscube campuses, and some of our transnational education campuses as well in China and Singapore. So all of you in your answers, they obviously address being physically present on the campus, but how else would you engage with these students? Doncha, I'll come to you first.
I mean, I imagine it will be more of sort of online reaching out. And again, Dr. Ghassan is quite responsive. I know he's not able to be with us just now, but a lot of the information that and concerns that he's been hearing has been from a distance, and he is very responsive, and he is also very internationally minded. I mean, he's been traveling, in the process of us nominating him, he was traveling literally around the world. So he is already quite an internationally minded person, and a very, very articulate person as well. Very easy to talk to. I think anyone who's actually spoke to him in person has commented how easy he is to approach, whether it's on a phone call, in person, or on camera. So I'm sure he'll definitely be able to manage that and be open to respond to any queries from the far off, distant campuses, whether it's in Scotland or internationally.
Thank you. Joseph, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, so Lady Ray will continue the work she's done, especially the Dumfries campus. She's been there quite a few times through the past 3 years to try and make them feel more involved in the Scottish University of Glasgow life. She'll continue her online surgeries, which she found was the best way in which she could reach students at any point. And even when these surgeries weren't able to happen, if a student came to her with a query, her phone number and her email were always given so that students can reach her when needed. And she'll continue up these active roles that she's always had, being able to talk to the students in the best way and the best time for them. I know for myself, when I've contacted her at any point when it comes to the rector or even personal issues beforehand, she responded at that same day. There was no delay, there was no wait about. She responded and she took the care that she had and reflected all the issues that she had.
Thank you, Joseph. Susie, if I could come to you next.
I don't think comedy pays enough for me to justify going to the international campuses, but I would certainly have my email open and be more than happy to have online surgeries for the international students. We're a top 100 university and we need to be visible in all fronts. We have the technology to be able to do that, so let's do it. We have a great name around the world, the University of Glasgow, and I think it's very important for the rector to do that. With regard to Garscube, it's just up the road, and with regards to Dumfries, it's only 90 minutes away in a car. It's more than achievable. I can also go in there if I say had to happen to be driving to work south of the border, which sometimes I do. So for me, I'm more than happy to have my email open, phone numbers open, and access to me, but also be available, because I understand that the vets do feel that they're a wee bit left alone out there. And it would also be the same with Dumfries, where I could go down and speak to the students. And you know what? That's important. And that's why I want to be rector, because I think it's really important to engage with people. And there is nothing more interesting in this life than engaging with people. This isn't about me or any of the other candidates. It's actually about the students. And it's really, really important that all of us, whoever wins this election, is visible around all the campuses for all the students, whether they be in Singapore or whether they be in Gascube Road or Gilmore Hill.
Thank you, Susie. And Paul, finally.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're doing tonight is a good example of how you engage. I regularly host hybrid events. I do a cross-party group on migration, for example, in the Scottish Parliament, which has people coming in from around the world, as well as attending in person. So I'm very, used to that kind of format of working. I think the idea fundamentally for the rector is to meet people where they're at, and that's how I tend to approach things. It's not to sit on a pedestal and expect people to present themselves. To me, it's about being low threshold and accessible. You can email. We can, I want to proactively have regular sort of roundtables like this, which are online, which are easy to dial into and to engage. It shouldn't be an onerous process to get in touch with me. That's really the spirit in which I'll go forward. In terms of understanding the role of the rector going beyond Gilmore Hill, absolutely familiar with the Crichton campus, been there several occasions. It's no drama to be there and to go down and take part in events and to participate and involve myself. Similarly, Garscube, no stranger to it, used to go to the gym quite a lot there. And also, I was just a couple of weeks ago was doing a lecture at the Glasgow School of Art, been heavily involved with the GSA, obviously going through a difficult time, looking at the reconstruction and the Stowe building. So I've been looking at working with the management to try and improve the student offer at the GSA as well, which is a huge issue. I was doing a lecture just a couple of weeks ago on the history of Springburn, and how the city developed there, which had over 150 students from the art school in attendance. So, happy to engage, happy to be involved where needed. I'm finding it difficult to say no to people. So always keen to be useful.
Thank you all for your answers there. Our next question comes from a student who's asking how you plan to engage with students whose political views and alliances might differ from yours, being conscious of the fact that the role of rector is to represent and champion the voices of all students on campus, and given in mind that our campus hosts a huge variety of students with various backgrounds and experiences. So, Joseph, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, since Lady Ray started her first campaign back in 2020, she's held the principle that she should be an apolitical rector. And this, I think, leads best to why she is probably the best candidate for this, as she's not going to put forward her own viewpoints when it comes to student issues. She's the student representative, and that's what she sees herself as. She doesn't see herself as pushing one agenda, another agenda. She sees herself respecting all students. Her role as a judge allows this to properly be done. She's done this for years. She's had to be impartial. She has no qualms about putting her own personal views aside and speaking to those who may have a different view. She's had, of course, she's a lady, she's been around, she's done lots of work. She knows how to interact with those with different viewpoints. And over the past 2 years, she's done that. She's had no complaints about students who say, oh, I spoke to Lady Ray and she said no because she believes something different. She's an apolitical rector and she sees that as the role.
Thank you, Joseph. Paul?
Yeah, fundamentally, the role is to activate the student voice. It's to be a conduit to create space for the student voice to be heard on campus, in the university court, and elsewhere within the management structures of the university. That's fundamentally it. And I would be committed to doing that without fear or favour, regardless of my personal views about what the issue is. Ultimately, as a Democrat, it's about respecting the voice of the students and giving them the agency. And I would be, willing to be directed by the student voice in that regard. The university's got a strong tradition of electing political rectors. Indeed, even though I didn't, share the political views of Charles Kennedy, I campaigned for him to be rector because I recognised he was going to be an effective advocate for the university student body, and so he was. And indeed, similarly, got a great relationship with Amar Anwar, who isn't of the same political persuasion as me either, but we rub along well, we get on well, because our love is for the university as an institution and the people who comprise the university community. We want to see it succeed, and we want to see our city and our community succeed. That's really what it's about for us. And I regularly get involved in cross-party campaigns. The campaign for extending free bus travel to people seeking asylum required me to work with SNP and Green parliamentarians on a cross-party basis to get that concession from the government. And it's been an effective way forward. And the best campaigns I've ever ran have been on a collegiate cross-party basis. It's how we get things done in this country, really, and it's our country at its best. So for me, that's the greatest satisfaction. So for me, it's not a problem.
Thank you, Paul. And Doncho?
Okay. So I've already kind of touched upon this, but Dr. Abu-Sittah has been engaging with voices he disagrees with already. He actually was very happy and willing to meet with the Jewish Society on campus, which has, as we understand, different opinions on the state of Israel and on Zionism. And the whole point of that meeting was for them to come to an agreement about involving Jewish students and a variety of Jewish voices as well in coming up with a definition of anti-Semitism that does not penalize pro-Palestinian activism, right? Because Ghassan recognizes fundamentally, as do Jewish students on campus, that anti-Semitism is absolutely a threat, right? So he has and understands all of these concerns and is more than willing, able, and happy to do that. And as far as agendas and political statements go, our agenda and our political statements are clear. And this university's complicity in genocide, right? This is the main aim that we want. And we believe that this absolutely represents the vast majority of opinion on campus, whether it's Glasgow Against Arms and Fossil Fuels, or whether it's the 200 students that joined us in person at the Boy Door on Friday. We do represent the majority. And obviously, if students vote for him, they would be voting for him primarily for that. But he's always willing and able to listen and to take other people's concerns as well. And he's already shown that in one campus visit, and we're going to have him hopefully for 3 years. So there'll be 3 more years of that.
Thank you, Doncho. And finally, Susie.
I think the role of rector is, by its very definition, a political role, in the sense it's the politics around the university. It's not about the rector's politics. I have my politics. You've seen me in question time and in debate night with my politics. I've told you what my politics are. I'm centre-left. I believe in independence, and I'm pro-LGBT with trans rights. But that's my politics. That's no one else's politics. They don't come into my role as rector because I don't actually care what the students' politics are. I'll say that again because someone coughed. I don't actually care what student has got whatever politics. I actually just care about the students. That's what matters. What I believe, I'm 44 years old. I've voted in far too many elections because we've had far too much political upheaval. But here's the thing, you only vote in about 3 elections, general elections in your life for you. The rest of it, you're either thinking about your pensioner parents or your children coming through. And that's just life. So this isn't about me being rector, about my politics and disagreeing with you. Unfortunately, so many of the students have grown up in a polarised political society that we are now living in this echo chamber of I'm right, you're wrong. And that's not positive politics. Positive politics is about coming together and finding agreement. And what I found in life and what I found through my experience, that the people that you think you're furthest apart from, sometimes you've actually got more in common than maybe you would both like to admit, and there's always a middle ground. But the role of rector isn't about what I believe, and it's not about what one particular student believes. It's about the students. It's not about our personal choice. This is why I've never been a member of a political party, because I have never toed a party line in my life. That's why I do the job I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, everyone. I appreciate we've asked a lot of questions about the role of the rector, but we now have some issue-specific questions for you, starting with welfare and student safety. So we've received a question from a student who's asked, how would each of you look to protect reproductive rights for students on campus? And Paul, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, well, quite a timely issue. As I chaired the Health Committee in Parliament this week, and we were considering the abortion buffer zones bill. It is a major issue that we have seen in Glasgow hospitals in recent years, people protesting outside them and intimidating and trying to influence women in making decisions about their reproductive rights. And it is a serious concern that has been live for a number of years. We are considering legislation and how to set up these buffer zones of 200 metres around reproductive facilities. We have created provisions within that legislation to look at other facilities, which may include clinics on campus, for example, to allow for that safe space to be established. I'm supportive of the legislation, and I think that's fundamental. I think it's something that should be reflected in university policy about the student conduct on campus, but also should be reflected in national legislation, which I hope we'll see on the statute books before long. But we had a very challenging session in Parliament this week where opponents of the legislation were giving evidence, and they were sort of advocating for their rights to protest. But I think the reality is we have to protect the rights of women in a very vulnerable position to access healthcare without feeling intimidated and unfairly influenced. So I certainly would be supportive of that legislation and would advocate for a similar policy to be considered on campus in terms of student conduct and indeed all members of the university community's conduct.
Thank you, Paul. If I could come to you next, Joseph.
Yeah, when it comes to this issue, Lady Ray would do what she's done for the past 3 years, and she'd try to protect all rights for all students on campus, no matter what their opinions are, what their beliefs are. I would try to strive with the rights that they have, tried in both UK and Scottish law.
Thank you, Joseph. Susie, if I could come to you next.
I am of no surprise to anyone. I am pro-choice. When I was at the university maybe 2 weeks ago, I was talking to two students who were representing Amnesty, doing a fundraiser outside the Fraser building, and telling me about the Emily test and stuff like that. So listen, this is really important, right? And I'm saying this as a gay woman who's child-free. I don't have kids of my own. This is really important when we are living in a world where America rolled back Roe versus Wade. Right, I know some students might not like abortion, some students it might be against their religion, but at the end of the day, this is pro-choice. This is for women to make that decision, and I will 100% back that as I have done my whole life. Like even in the education establishment that I was taught in, I remember in the science classrooms there was pictures and teachers trying to give you little feet to wear. No, it's not acceptable. It's pro-choice. Simple as that.
Thank you, Susie. And Doncho, to you for this one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Dr. Abu-Sittah is absolutely committed to ensuring that every single pupil feels safe and heard in on campus, regardless of the issue, and that includes reproductive rights. He is a doctor himself, and he's seen the damage that has been done that is disproportionately affecting women in Gaza right now, and he is willing to take that into consideration at the uni as well, whether it is to do with anyone feeling safe to have an abortion, or to make sure that people are not facing threats and intimidations or anything else. And he will absolutely work with the uni to tackle any form of intimidation that anyone faces, from whether it's inside uni or out with uni, and would also give students the means to actually express themselves. And he's also working, I know we might touch on this tonight, but he is also absolutely supportive of the QMU's attempts to get the Emily test through for gender-based violence. But I think that says a lot about his stance on reproductive issues, and especially on safety around the safety of women on campus.
Thank you, Doncho. Our next question is, if you were elected rector, how would you further the work done by the university and other organisations on campus to tackle gender-based violence? And if I could remind all candidates to keep their answers succinct, that would be brilliant. Susie, we'll come to you first.
So there are organisations out there who deal with victims of gender-based violence. I would be looking for the university to encourage those organisations to come in with their speakers, because they do this. They have speakers, they have male and female speakers who have suffered gender-based violence and come in and discuss their lived experience. I would also make this compulsory unless you have been a victim or witnessed gender-based violence. This is really, really important. Again, I can't believe at the age of 44 I still need to discuss this, but it's really important. We need to get the organisations in, and what you find is whenever you share lived experiences with people, it has a much more powerful effect to the audience of that than, say, an online module. That's how I would deal with it.
Thank you, Susie. Paul, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, it's a major and continuing issue, and I think Susie spoke very well to it there. Recently, we've had the case of Ellie Wilson, who spoke harrowingly of her experience whilst a student at the university, and indeed how the perpetrator was able to matriculate at another Scottish university whilst awaiting trial, which was a shocking situation. And certainly she's leading a campaign to change legislation in that regard, which I'm fully supportive. I knew Ellie whilst she was a student at the university, and to know that she was experiencing that situation whilst I knew her and I didn't have a clue was a shocking reality to understand. But again, these things manifest themselves in a lot of ways which aren't obvious, and we need to be clear about where people feel intimidated, where they feel that they're in an abusive or coercive situation. They can speak out, and there's places where they can go to get help on campus, and that there should be no stigma or sense that they're being gaslit or not believed. I think that's a huge concern. We need to ensure that where students have experienced that they come to me, or if I were rector, or indeed come to me as a parliamentarian and tell me that that's happening, so I can address that and help them address it. There's been some examples really in recent years about safe home at night campaigns for hospitality workers, which I've supported, and trying to change our licensing laws. I know a lot of students work in hospitality settings, particularly women workers feeling threatened, particularly when there's not an availability of public transport or safe transport home after shifts. Something I want to try and improve, working with the United Hospitality Trade Union. But also recently, after the COP26 debacle, which some of you may remember, where women were forced to walk through Kelvin Grove Park in the pitch black after massive diversions were put in place between Sauchiehall Street, Argyll Street and Gibson Street. There was issues raised about safe routes. We know we had a young woman, a recently graduated nurse, who was murdered a few years ago in Kelvin Way. So their campaign was spawned to basically called Light the Way, to try and improve safe lighting, and as part of a wider feminist urban planning policy in Glasgow, which I've been a big, strong supporter of, and really keen to try and push that agenda. We've got a pilot underway in Kelvin Grove Park now, with the main route between Sauchiehall Street and Gibson Street being illuminated. Hopefully can build on that agenda. I regularly attend meetings about that, We had a summit at Glasgow Cala Uni just a few weeks ago about it, and hopefully can continue to make progress. But there's a whole multifaceted approach here, whether it's the physical environment that we can design to be safer for women, but also looking at how the power structures play out with workers in safe workplace, as well as the campus experience as well.
Thank you, Paul. And if I come to you next, Doncho.
So, as I already mentioned, Ghassan is supportive of the Emily test for gender-based violence. So it's prevention, intervention, and support training for each and every member of staff. And that is something that he has taken on because he has spoken to students. He has spoken to the QMU who have been trying to get this through, who have been campaigning for this for a while. And as rector, he is absolutely attuned to those needs and is willing to take that forward. And of course, gender-based violence in itself is a political issue as well. Gender-based violence occurs within a patriarchal social system, and Ghassan recognizes that. And he is absolutely willing to talk to anyone who wants to come forward, and to the unions on campus as well, and hear their concerns out. And he's already mentioned how he is committed to having a campus that is free of gender-based violence in his interviews. So I think that is how he'll do it. He's committed to the Emily test.
Thank you, Doncho. And finally, Joseph.
Yeah, Lady Ray would like to encourage what she's done so far, and would like to support and encourage the complete intolerance of any such behaviours on campus. And she'd like to encourage any student to come forward, as they hope that they'll be listened to and supported. She'd also like to continue the work she's done so far with the council, supporting their proposals against tackling gender-based violence. And she'd also like to use her experience both as a lawyer and as a judge in helping to ease the mitigation that some of these cases can have, and give personal experiences on how these can be treated best as possible.
Thank you, everyone, for your answers there. Moving on to some questions. Obviously, issues around the war in Gaza and divestment have been particularly present topics at the university campus recently. So I have a few questions for you in that space. Our first question comes from a student who has asked simply, what is your position on the war in Gaza, and would you lobby the university to divest from the arms trade? And Joseph, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, Lady Ray would like to make it clear that she sees the role of Rector as not political, but personally, she would want to see a ceasefire by all parties in this terrible war, and that's all she's prepared to say on that point. When it comes to the divestment of the arms trade, she's currently been sat on the council and has been supporting the causes so far that's been put forward to help divest.
Thank you, Joseph. And Susie?
Can I just say, before I answer this question, which I've already answered in a way, to Doncho, I firmly believe, I know you're his representative, that the heroism shown by Dr. Abu-Sittah is extraordinary. In 7 wars, to be a war surgeon and to actually choose that life when it would be much easier not to, he's an exceptionally brave man who I have the utmost respect for. I have already stated, I believe in a free Palestine. I think what's happening in Gaza is genocide. I think the way the West has behaved is disgusting. And I don't think at any point that a top 100 university such as Glasgow should have any business in having investment in arms, because where you have investment in arms, you have an interest in conflict. And when you have an interest in conflict, you have the interest in death of innocent women, men, and children. And it's fundamentally wrong, and it's morally wrong to benefit financially from that. There are other ways I believe the university can make money, and it's not at the death of children. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. And Paul, if I could come to you on this next. I'm not sure that we can hear you, Paul.
I think we've all watched the horror play out, seeing disgust and helplessness in many ways in the last few months, and indeed to the extent that hello?
You're back now. You're all good
Hello?
now.
Can you hear me?
Sorry about that. I think we had some delay, but you're back now.
Sorry. Right. It was just to say, I think we've all watched the situation play out in the occupied territories in the last few months with increasing, horror, disgust, and indeed listening to Dr. Abu-Sittah talk about this just reiterated the horrific situation that particularly medics are facing in breach of the Geneva Conventions, and indeed quite clear evidence of war crimes that are being committed. So, to the extent that it had an effect, which wasn't unfortunately much. We've all voted for a ceasefire in the Scottish Parliament in November. We had an agreement between the government and the Labour Party to vote for that ceasefire in the Scottish Parliament. Sadly, it hasn't had much influence over the situation, but nonetheless, it was important to show moral support and solidarity. Been in attendance at the weekly rallies that have taken place in Glasgow. And, it's just been horrific to see this continue to spiral out of control. I just can only hope that a ceasefire can be brokered before long, and we can start to see a massive reconstruction of Gaza, which has been, subject to the most intense bombardment of any place in the world since the Second World War. So I hope we can see that resolution happens before long. The loss of civilian life has been completely unacceptable and the most extreme example. As for divestment, I went to meet the occupation at the Hetherington a few weeks ago. We had a good discussion about that. I think it's important to listen to every voice on campus about these issues, and I think it's important that we do have a more democratic and transparent debate about the university's investments. The university is one of the top 3 institutions in the city in terms of scale, along with the council and the NHS. What are the opportunities of that investment, and how could it deliver social improvement for the city? We talk a lot about housing, for example. There's a lot of investors investing in purpose-built student accommodation in Glasgow. We know there's a housing emergency in Glasgow for students in particular. Can we not join the dots here and understand that we could achieve a more socially useful outcome by investing in housing, for example? So, I think there is a conversation that's needed on campus. Divestment is one side of the equation. I think we need to also have a question or a debate, certainly on campus, about what should the university be investing in, how could that improve Glasgow's economic and social justice, and probably one of the most socially challenged cities in the UK.
Thank you, Paul. And finally, Doncho, to you.
I would like to start off by thanking Susie actually for your kind words about Dr. Abu-Sittah. I'm sure if you were here, he'd also thank you and really appreciate it. I think it is very clear that this situation calls for an explicitly political rector who is able to represent this concern. As he said in his interview International, Palestine is the issue, right? It is an issue that connects all struggles internationally for peace, for justice. And this university is absolutely complicit in the current genocide by virtue, well, if you want to use the word virtue, by virtue of holding shares in BAE Systems and £5.5 million in weapons companies overall. And I think it's important to remember that Dr. Ghassan has seen firsthand the damage and the violence that these weapons have caused. These weapons that his alma mater has been funding and has been profiting from. So I think as far as divestment goes, that is absolutely clear. And let's not forget that the weapons that were used in this genocide or assault on the people of Gaza have ended up killing a Glasgow Uni alumnus in Dima Al-Hajj, right? This is the first time that her name has been mentioned in this debate. And I think it is incredibly important that we do remember her and also think about all of the thousands, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands that are going to die from this conflict. So as far as the conflict in Gaza goes, it's ceasefire. And he's seen, I think, 4 of these assaults on Gaza. He knows extremely well firsthand and politically what the situation is like. And he is absolutely 100% unwavering and committed towards social justice at home and abroad. And yeah, the university absolutely should divest, and his evidence has actually been used in the International Court of Justice in the genocide proceedings. And as he said, the university is at risk of being complicit in genocide by holding these shares. So divestment is not, it's also the issue on campus as well. We've seen the occupation. We've seen our movement on campus with the student walkouts. We've seen, as I said, a packed room, 200 students in a period of incredibly low engagement with university life. People are invigorated and energized by his campaign. And we have people coming up to us who are thanking him and thanking us for standing him as a candidate so that their views can be expressed. And we need, in order for these views to be expressed, and in order for us to have like a strong voice on this, we have to elect an explicitly political rector in Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah. He is the only candidate that will be able to do this. And I hope I've managed to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Doncho, and thank you to all of you. I have a couple more questions before we go to a break. So if I could again just remind you to keep your answers quite succinct and short, as I'm conscious that we started a little bit late tonight. As a follow-up to the question that I've asked there, we've had another one come in from a student who's asked, do you believe that it's possible for an educational institution to invest in an ethical and socially responsible way? And should students and staff have a say over the investment portfolio of their university? Susie, I'll come to you first.
Yes, I do think it's possible. I do think it's possible for, well, for any business really, to invest in projects which I think we can all just agree are a bit more morally just than the death of children. Do I think the students should have an opinion? Absolutely. This is the students' money. Right, I know this is a bit of a cagey subject. I'm old enough to remember when universities were still seats of education. This is now a different thing altogether. This is the students' money that gets paid back. And I don't care if you're a Scottish student and it's paid for by the Scottish taxpayer. This is still being paid back. And yeah, there should be an opportunity for the students to speak to the university management, whether that be via the role of rector or as a kind of yearly discussion that takes place. But this is the students' money. They pay an absolute fortune for their education. And it is their money, whether they pay it back long term or whether I and any other Scottish taxpayer are paying for it. Because ultimately they're going to pay for it down the line when they're paying for someone else's education. So yes, they should have it. And I actually think if we open that broader discussion and integrate the students via the rector, via the lecturers, and have a more uniformed approach as a body, we would have less division and polarisation on the campus. And then when you have less division and polarisation, yeah, they'll still, not all of the people are going to be happy all of the time, but people can come together. And do you know what? Maybe the students, again, will start to feel a little bit pride in being that University of Glasgow student, because having spent a lot of time up there just now, there are big divisions and the students seem a bit lost and apathetic. And most importantly, they feel powerless. And when I see 20, 21-year-olds feeling apathetic and powerless, it makes me incredibly sad, because you shouldn't be feeling like that at that age. But unfortunately, there's been so much disengagement from a non-working rector to the university management, the students and the global pandemic, that it's now time to kind of put arguments aside, come round each other and start to be a bit more of a democratic organisation. I think that's what's important. I think most importantly, that's important for the students, because they feel that they are being ignored, and that's not fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. If I could go to Joseph next.
Yeah, Lily raised the opinion that, of course, students should be entitled to views on how investments are, and the views should have well, of course, be listened to. You know, you're part of this uni, you should be a valuable part of the decision-making process, and should also be able to decide when a decision is going against the views of the student body. And yes, investment should be ethical. I think it's simple as that.
Thank you, Joseph. Doncho, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, so students absolutely should have a say in what the university divests in, and if they did, we wouldn't be investing in weapons. So Dr. Ghassan is absolutely clear on this. And he also sees fundamentally that the reason why students are alienated from decisions within campus is because education is treated as a venture for profit rather than as an institution for learning and for actually being a world changer in the very true sense of the word, right? This isn't just a slogan, right? And he absolutely does take that seriously. And he recognizes that this is because of this commodification of education. So yeah, he is absolutely supportive in that in terms of divestment and in terms of not just weapons, but also more sustainable investments as well to ensure that there is actually a future world that we can change.
Thank you, Donjo. And finally, Paul.
Yeah, well, as someone who believes in a cooperative economy, extending democratic control over the institution that is the university is something I strongly support. And as chair of the university court is something I would be eager to give more time and space to on the agenda for the university, and would certainly want to empower student voices to be part of that conversation. And I think one of the starker examples of this sort of exploitation that we've seen in recent years was during the COVID pandemic, when we had students effectively locked into their accommodation so the university could continue to take rents off them whilst not providing any real service in the form of teaching. And this was students' money basically being harvested because the university business model was not sustainable without those rents. I think it was one of these little glimpses of how utterly unfair and egregious the whole business model actually can be. And there needs to be a fundamental rethink on that. So, greater democratic oversight and transparency over how this operates is key to me. One of the things I've really wanted to press is the establishment of a student housing cooperative in Glasgow. It's not something that currently exists in the city. It does in Edinburgh, but even then, when we're seeing a proliferation of what is known as purpose-built student accommodation across the Glasgow area, largely financed by tax haven capital, which is extracting huge amounts of rents and then disappearing into opaque environments where they could be reinvested in anything. We don't know what it could be invested in. There's no transparency over where those rents flow. So students are basically being harvested as a commodity, and I think that is a fundamentally unsustainable situation. We do need to change that. We need to rebuild wealth in our city, and the university should be an agent of doing that, not something that's actually facilitating extraction of wealth from Glasgow. That's something we really need to tackle. There's a lot of focus on things like research grants and outputs from the university in that respect, but actually a large part of the business model of the university is built on rents. And we know there's inequality even within the student financing model. Students from a working class background are much more likely to find themselves in debt because they have to take out student loans, and then to see the proceeds of those loans being used to finance unethical investments, I think is pretty obnoxious. So the key is, first of all, transparency, space to debate these issues on campus and provide a sense of agency. Currently, students feel quite alienated from those forces. They're subject to forces that they don't feel they can control. If they were to speak out individually, they might be, vulnerable to victimization. So I think building that capacity on campus is key. That's what I'd be looking to do.
Thank you, Paul. I have one final question for you before we go to a break, and I appreciate we've been talking quite a lot, so thank you all for your patience. The final question relates to the conversation at hand, but particularly focuses on the recent rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism on campus. So given the stark increase in this in recent time, how would you work to address this issue for the students of University of Glasgow? And I will go to Joseph first.
Yeah, Lady Ray fully believes that all students on campus should feel safe, they should feel supported, and that no matter what religious belief, no matter what belief they actually hold, that they should be able to feel that they can come onto the campus no matter whether that's Garthcube, Gilman Hill, Singapore, or anywhere else, and feel that they belong. And she'll continue the work that she's done as rector to support students when they have claims against this, and then investigate the university when these are not followed up. She'll continue to support students when they notice rise in issues, and she'll continue to work on court as a voice for the students when regarding these sort of issues.
Thank you, Joseph. Paul?
I think fundamentally the role of the rector is to be a unifying presence on campus, to deal with the sectarian issues that might arise. Ultimately, that's something that a figure like Charles Kennedy was very effective at doing. I think we've seen a shocking rise in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in recent years in Scotland, and it's something that we all have a stake in sorting out. We all have a stake in challenging it. We can't simply be passive bystanders to that kind of behaviour. It's often rooted in ignorance. I see it a lot in my work with people seeking asylum in Glasgow, routine, misconceptions, routine bigotry. That I find it quite shocking at times, but we have a moral duty to call it out for what it is, and to challenge that. I think the university does a good job at setting some decent standards on that in that regard, and I think there's a much greater awareness on campus and all the campus institutions, including the student bodies, on this issue. But I think there's still a role to bring communities together, particularly in light of the situation in the Middle East, to bring Jewish and Muslim communities together to try and build bridges, build interfaith relations. I think Glasgow generally has quite a good, track record in doing that, but there's more we can always do. And certainly the role of the rector would be to serve that as that unifying purpose on campus. And that's something I'd be eager to try and do.
Thank you, Paul. And Susie?
I think to say that Glasgow doesn't have sectarian issues is vastly understating the history of this city. Unfortunately, on campus 4 weeks ago, a member of my campaign team was abused because it was quite clear on my flyer that I am pro-LGBT. So I understand that there's a rise in hate crime against marginalised communities. And as I said in my opening statement, I'm here to represent everyone. But here's the thing. I believe that a university, somewhere that I was told that I couldn't go, is an educational enclave. It's a melting pot. It's somewhere to debate and discuss ideas and theory and religion and all these things. And it should be a place of acceptance. We are talking about educated people here who should be accepted as for who and what they are, regardless of creed or colour. I have lived in the East End of this city for the majority of my life, and I have seen the effects of what sectarianism and bigotry can be. And Glasgow's a much, much better place than that. It's a come on in, the kettle's on type of place. But we do have an underlying current of it, and it stems from our own social history. So let's not be kind of looking above this and saying that. Also, simultaneously, while that's going on, let's just look at what happened in the news the past 2 days. Let's just look at the leading government not calling out exactly the misogyny and the racism that we have seen directed at Diane Abbott, but yet a Prime Minister tells you that we need to harden our laws against protest. That is the country that we are living in. We are living in a country where they are stoking culture wars every day, and we, as human beings, as people of this city, or people who are at the University of Glasgow, must rise above that. Welcome each other, break bread with each other, talk to each other. And like I said earlier on, you will have more in common with the person that you think's opposite you than what you'll ever have thought you would have. And you know what? That's part of the magic. That's part of the magic of being in somewhere like the University of Glasgow, because it really is a melting pot, and this city's a melting pot, and it should be something that you go and discover and respect other people, and don't let governments and hate-filled people who have been stoked by the culture wars get the better of us. And as a rector, I would be actively encouraging that, actively bringing people together, sitting down. It's not about religion. It's not about people's gods. It's about people, because we all bleed the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. And finally, Doncho, if I could come to you last.
Thank you. As I've already mentioned, Dr. Ghassan sees Islamophobia and anti-Semitism as two sides of the same coin, right? When anti-Semitic crimes rise, Islamophobic hate crimes rise as well, and it's the same the other way around, which is why he's so committed to listen to Jewish voices in the effort to also repeal the IHRA definition. And I know this is something that people are concerned about, because it's something that he has been spoken to about. And essentially what we want to create is a space where Palestinians and pro-Palestinian activism can be discussed without accusations of anti-Semitism, while also targeting the scourge that is anti-Semitism. And the aim of that is to also ensure that anti-Zionist Jewish voices are not delegitimized by the IHRA as well. He believes that fighting anti-Semitism is actually part of advancing for the Palestinian struggle for liberation against threats of colonialism. And we will stand in solidarity with any oppressed and marginalized group as a result of that. And as I've said, he has been speaking to the Jewish Society on campus, and we've been liaising with them as well about making sure that we include a variety of opinions on this to ensure that we protect the right to criticize the ongoing genocide and to criticize the state of Israel, and also recognizing that anti-Semitic crimes do tend to rise whenever there's a flare-up in the situation in Palestine, right? So that is something that Ghassan is absolutely committed to, and he recognizes that a lot of anti-Semitic forces hide behind their support for Israel, especially a lot of far-right politicians in Europe. So he's absolutely committed to tackling that, and he sees it as absolutely fundamental and inseparable for the struggle for a free Palestine.
Thanks so much, Donjo. Thank you all for being so engaged in the responses to these questions, some of which I know have been quite challenging. I'm going to give you a bit of a break right now. So we'll take about 5 minutes, and we'll be back after the break with some candidate-specific questions. So to those of you watching, this is your last chance to get some questions in for the candidate, and you can submit those in the form in the YouTube link. See you all in 5 minutes. Hello everyone, thank you for waiting for us. That's us back after the break for some candidate-specific questions. We're conscious that we are running a little bit late and the aim is to finish around 8:15. Due to the time constraints, we're going to limit the answers to the questions to 1 minute per question, and we will go in the order of the candidates as following. We'll go Ghassan, Paul, Susie, and then Lady Rita Ray. So whenever the candidates are ready, we'll get started with the questions.
Yeah, all good.
Brilliant. Hello, everybody. So the first question I'll ask to you, Doncho. One student has asked, whilst you're a Glasgow alumni, you're currently based in London. If elected, will you be an absent rector or a present rector? And do you plan on regularly interacting with students on campus? And I'm limiting your answers to a minute and will interrupt you if it runs over.
Well, the short answer is distance isn't really the issue here. It's a question of commitment. And Ghassan Abu-Sittah is absolutely committed to this. I know he's not able to make it tonight, but there is some unavoidable stuff that he's had to deal with. But yeah, he is absolutely committed to that. He's been in 7 war zones this century. I mean, if that doesn't speak to his character, I don't know what does. He traveled up here and last Friday to speak to students, and he is absolutely, in every conversation we've had and he's had with students, is absolutely committed to being there for the university. He cares about this community and this city, and I'd encourage everyone to check out his interviews that he's done. There'll be one coming out in Communicate, and also there's one international as well, and to also engage with the campaign material as well.
Thank you, Doncho. Coming to you next, Paul, we've had a question from a student called Alan who's asked, how do you plan to combine your grandiose political aspirations and the rectorship? Charles Kennedy did not have nearly as much on his plate as you did when he was rector, whilst you intend on becoming a minister within the Scottish Government. And I will limit you to a minute.
Well, I don't know about grandiose, but certainly my job first and foremost is to represent the people of Glasgow, and I think my track record speaks for itself in that regard. Just earlier this year, was on the streets in Denniston, leading a community campaign to save a local housing association and protect over £180 million of community-owned assets from an asset stripped by a London-based multinational housing group. That's the sort of thing I do. I've worked across different NGOs in the city, advancing asylum rights. I don't pursue a grandiose parliamentary career in that sense. I go and speak in Parliament on behalf of my constituents primarily. So I don't see the role being compromised by that at all. I think it actually is a huge advantage in having the ability to take the voice of the students, not just to the management of the university, but also into the floor of the Scottish Parliament and challenge the ministers where necessary to advance the cause of students at Glasgow University. And that's something I will do without fear or favour. And I think, I don't have much of a personal life, mainly because I spend every waking hour trying to work for the people of Glasgow.
That's your time, Paul. Thank you. Thanks. Moving on to you, Susie. We've had a question from Iris who's asked, in comparison to the other candidates, your manifesto lacks any comprehensive policies and includes a general direction in which you would like to take things. So if elected, what specific things would you plan to do over your tenure? And your time starts now. I think you're muted, Susie.
We have the accessibility issues around some of the older buildings within the university that have to be looked at, having spoken to some of the students. We also have the diversity and inclusion, which obviously is something that's very important to me and very close to home. With regards to divestment and fossil fuels, it's something that I would actively be encouraging and discussing with the university at court to make sure that we do it. And also the affordability of education, because what I'm discovering is that students are coming to university, especially those from a working class background, and as they're going through their university, even if they're not paying for fees, the actual cost of being there is crippling them, and it's then cutting them off to get into that second, third, fourth year and fundamentally their master's course. So that, to me, is all the things that I would be looking to focus on in my 3-year tenure. It doesn't need to just be one issue.
Thank you. A question going to Joseph on behalf of Lady Ray. Another student has asked, Why is Lady Ray's manifesto so similar to the one that she presented in 2021? Does this signify that she has failed on her promises? And your time starts now.
The manifesto is similar because the issues in the university still exist. Lady Ray would like these issues to be fixed. It doesn't mean that she's failed on her promises. As she said multiple times, she will not make promises that she can't keep. One of the fact is that the university, these are growing issues. These are issues that will probably be here now. They'll probably be here in 20 years. You know, student safety will always need to be addressed. Widening participation and gender equality will always need to be addressed. And as a role director, she has helped these and she's helped these to grow, but there's still more work to be done. And after, if she's elected again, tenure, there'll still be more work to be done.
Thank you, Joseph. Going back to you, Doncho, we've had quite a long question come in, and this is because we've had a substantial even amount of questions for Dr. Abu-Sittah around his desire to replace the IRA definition. One student, Anna, has asked, with anti-Semitism on the rise across campuses, what signal does weakening the definition of anti-Semitism send to Jewish students? And this has been followed up by another student, Dorothy, who's noted that this action would be in direct opposition to the wishes of the Jewish student community and notes a lack of consultation with the community. With these concerns from students in mind, could you expand on his desire to replace the definition and whether or not you believe this will affect his relationship with the Jewish student population on campus?
Yeah, as I've said, Dr. Abu-Sittah in his visit to the university actually spoke with the Jewish society on campus, including, I believe, the president of that society. So in terms of again, these are questions that absolutely can be and should be put forward to him. And he's already made it clear that anti-Semitism cannot hide behind pro-Palestine protests. And you cannot use the genocide that the Palestinian people are currently experiencing to justify hate. And he is absolutely committed to that. His issue and our issue with the IHRA, we don't see as a weakening of the definition. What we are seeing is we want a definition that would not penalize people expressing anti-Israel sentiments, and that includes a growing anti-Zionist Jewish movement as well. And there is a strong tradition within Jewish
That's your
movements
time,
also
Doncho.
Zionism.
Thank you. Paul, a question for you from another student. As you're currently an elected member of the Scottish Parliament, how would you reassure your constituents in the event that you become rector that it will not be detrimental to your responsibilities to them?
Well, as I say, first and foremost, represent the people of Glasgow, to represent the people who attend the university, students in that role. And I don't think it does compromise it. I think we've had numerous examples over decades of members of Parliament who have been the rector and it's not compromised their position. In fact, some of our best rectors, I go back to the point about Charles Kennedy being one of the standout examples of recent years, fulfilling the role admirably, even though he didn't actually represent a Glasgow constituency. So I think it reinforces the role. The university is such an important institution for the whole of the city. It's one of the top 3 biggest employers in Glasgow. Therefore, we need to look at how we can build that institution as a more democratic and just force for the greater benefit of the whole of the people of Glasgow. That's what I want to do as rector.
Thank you, Paul. Susie, Ross Whip has asked, in your manifesto, you mentioned that you didn't go to university due to the barriers in your way and that this makes you an ideal candidate because you can empathise with students in similar situations. As you are the only candidate who doesn't have an academic background, do you see this as an advantage or a challenge?
I actually see it as an advantage. I've worked quite a lot in the private sector. I started off in hospitality and then went into the construction, working as an apprentice, up to estimating manager / director in some positions. So I think coming from a non-academia background and get into that environment and looking at it, you look at it through fresh eyes and you see how things are being done. And sometimes things just get done because it's habit. And sometimes maybe a fresh approach is what's needed there, and someone from the outside coming in who's not part of the university establishment and certainly not OFPA with the way university life is with regards to the management. So yeah, I think it is. And I also do a job now where I talk to people from age 18 to 80. So I think I can certainly offer the students a strong voice when they want to be heard over certain subjects at the university court.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
Joseph Ross, with another question, has commented that Lady Rita Ray has been criticised in the media for being an absent rector and is coincidentally absent from this evening's hustings and was in her previous hustings. How do you think she would respond to comments of this nature?
So first, in response to being absent from hustings, this is purely just due to her job, and it's unfortunate that this is the case. But last time with Jamie and myself, this time she's had great representation, hopefully, and that hopefully that this isn't a barrier. When it comes to the missing rector issue, hopefully this is referring to the Glasgow Guardian article. Not only was that untrue, but it was also defamatory. Lady Ray chose not to take any further action, as she didn't want to drag anyone through the university through any sort of legal thing, especially as it's a student newspaper. But the university themselves did even come out and make a statement saying that this was incorrect. Lady Ray, as the rector for the past time, has served her role and has done it excellently, and that's why we hope she's elected again.
Thank you, Joseph. Doncho, coming back to you, another student has asked Dr. Abu-Sittah, as the only candidate of colour, his election could work to champion anti-racism causes on campus. If elected, how would he ensure that anti-racism on campus is championed and that culture or race don't pose a barrier to higher education?
Obviously, it's a bit difficult for me to answer that question on his behalf specifically, but so I would like to echo what his statements about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and he absolutely recognizes the politics behind it, and racism, as with gender-based violence, is absolutely a political issue, and that's why we need a political rector as well. And he is someone who has shown willingness in discussing and reaching out to marginalized groups within campus, such as by meeting the Jewish Society. And he is absolutely committed to taking that forward. He's committed absolutely to anti-racist education and to anti-racism as a political ideology as well. So that will be his.
Thank you, Doncho. Paul, for you, we received a question from Cameron Eady, who has asked or who's commented that you recently received fierce backlash from the media after intending on hosting a parliamentary event on behalf of the arms industry actors who have supplied weapons to Israel. He notes that you only withdrew your support for the event after it garnered negative press. Given that there has been widespread outrage from the student population at Glasgow University at the collective punishment of Palestinians by the Israeli regime, do you feel you are in touch with the interests of students? And your time starts now.
So the event in question was actually a Scottish Apprenticeship Week event for engineering apprentices, which I was asked to add my name to sponsor about a year ago in order for it to take place, because any event in Parliament has to have a notional parliamentary sponsor. I didn't have any actual operational role in the guest list or organising invites and so on. I was just a notional named sponsor. It was then subsequently brought to my attention that one of the companies involved in attending that evening may have products that are manufactured in Scotland that are supplied to the Israeli Defence Forces and may well be involved in the war crimes or alleged war crimes in Gaza, or maybe directly used in that instance. Therefore, once that was brought to my attention, I withdrew my support. It wasn't due to bad publicity, it was due to the fact that it was brought to my attention. So that was the nature of the event. It wasn't an arms fair. It was an event for apprentices, of which there are many in Glasgow who do a great job in our city.
Thank you, Paul. That's your time. Susie, moving on to you, Ross Whip has commented that in the past you've attracted a lot of controversy for tweets containing ableist, homophobic and sectarian language. If elected, would you seek to represent all student groups, including those uncomfortable with this language? And your time starts now.
Absolutely. So the sectarian there was a tweet in the heat of a drunken football-related regrettable incident 12 years ago, which I fully owned up to, and I took my hands back. With regards to the homophobia, let me just say that there was a word used that I wouldn't use now that was used then, and I'm part of a community that took me in when my own family kicked me out for my sexuality. And let's just be mindful of this. That language was wrong now, but not then, and especially not within the community, who have reclaimed many words since then, such as queer, a word that for many people of my generation and older is still quite triggering. So, yeah, will I represent everybody? Yes, absolutely. Am I homophobic? Absolutely not. Am I sectarian? Absolutely not. But let's just be mindful of this. The language that we are using now as a society in 20 years' time may not be acceptable to
Thank
you
you, Susie.
or your
That's
children. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph, moving on to you on behalf of Rita Ray. Alan has asked, do you regret calling upon students to cross the picket lines of striking staff members?
As I'm not reading Ray myself, I had not had a word from her about this, so I can't comment on it.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, I lost my questions for a second there. We've had another question going back to you, Doncho, from a student who said, as a British Palestinian man, there's been a lot of contention over Dr. Abu-Sittah's candidacy, especially considering his proposal to change the adoption of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. If elected, how will he ensure that this doesn't impact students from minority backgrounds and that there's a positive environment on campus?
Okay. Again, I believe this has already been addressed in the previous questions, but just to reiterate, he has met with the Jewish Society on campus and is absolutely willing to listen to other voices. And he absolutely, believes that anti-Semitism cannot hide behind the Palestinian movement and rejects any kind of attempt for people to hijack the Palestinian cause to use it for their own anti-Semitic ends. And he is here to represent the students, and he will be doing everything while protecting Palestinians and any other student that of any background.
Thank you, Doncho. Paul, a question for you. You speak about an ethical investment strategy, particularly focusing on moving away from fossil fuels, but you don't mention arms investments in your manifesto. Considering that the university has already divested from fossil fuels and you continue to show support for the arms trade, and the student has noted that you've worked at BAE Systems, joked about having investments in them, and failed to mention this in your manifesto. Do you believe, again, that you're in touch with current issues at the university and the feeling of its students?
Well, I think I explained the particular, issue around the Scottish Apprenticeship Week event for young people coming to the Parliament, which I think was mischaracterised. But nonetheless, there was a legitimate concern about the participation of a company that had direct relations to supplying products to the Israeli Defence Forces, and I think that's a clear issue. Yes, when I graduated from university, I went to work at BAE Systems, building frigates for the UK Navy in Govan. Do I think this country should have an armed forces? Yes. Do I think that we should employ people in what is the biggest manufacturing industry in Glasgow, making frigates, making ships for our country's self-defence? Then yes. I've said that if there's a question about investing in the arms industry on campus, let's have that discussion. Let's have that debate on campus. Recently had the privilege of going along to the Ukraine Students Association service for 2 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on, a question for you, Susie. From Pablo, he's asked, or he's commented, that in your manifesto, you mentioned mental health problems and neurodivergent students. What type of support or actions would you take to ensure that these students feel represented and have their student experience improved?
Well, unfortunately, I've learned from being around the campus that many students who are really struggling with mental health, because we have a mental health epidemic coming down the line in this country, that there's not enough resource and support within the university to support them, and they're almost being means tested. And I don't know how we means test someone's mental health, but I know that we need to put the infrastructure and the support in place. We have a lot of international students and also students from other areas of the UK. Loneliness is a massive contributor to that as well. With recent a rise in autism diagnosis and neurodivergence in general, we need to start to look and talk to these students to see what they need to put in place to support them through their education at the University of Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Moving to you, Joseph. Laura Thompson has asked how Lady Rita Ray would improve awareness of the role of rector. A lot of students, herself included, didn't know that this role existed until these elections.
Yeah, that's definitely a question, and it's an issue that Lady Ray's had throughout her time as rector. She's said multiple times to me that it's just not as well known. More would be just trying to engage more with more student societies, trying to raise the profile of the rector a bit more than she's done. Obviously, she came into the role during COVID, so it's a bit hard to meet students on campus, and this has obviously continued. So by promoting the work that she's done so far, by showing the fact that it has helped some certain students, by promoting her surgeries and having them more on campus and more often, these are the ways in which she'll hope to do this.
Thank you, Joseph. We'll make this our last round of questions as I'm conscious of the time. So coming to you, Doncho, for our last question. One student has said that although his manifesto is all about Palestine, his campaign has expanded to talk about other issues like student housing. Are these new promises tacked onto a one-issue campaign, or is he committed to following through on them?
He is absolutely committed to following through on them. Right. I mean, this started out as an attempt to send a strong message to the university that we do support Palestine, but Ghassan expressed to us that he really wants to be a working rector, and he's someone who is absolutely politically engaged and alert to the issues that students are facing. For him, this is not just a single issue, and he sees the political relevance of the Palestinian question to all struggles for social justice around the world, including in housing, equality, in poverty. So this isn't just something that's attached onto the campaign. This is a core part of who he is politically and of what he stands for. And he's shown immense integrity and strength to bring that forward after everything that he's been through.
Thank you, Doncho. Paul, your last question. Iris has asked, if elected rector, you would still be beholden to the Labour whip in both Parliament and in your everyday life. How can students be sure that you're going to represent them and not your political interests, especially considering there's a possibility of having a Labour government in Westminster? And your time starts now.
Well, I'm not sure how that would be a contradiction. Of course, Charles Kennedy is a good example of that, because at the time he was rector, there was a very controversial debate about the future of student finance going on with the introduction of tuition fees or the increase in tuition fees in England. I don't really see how there would be a contradiction, to be honest with you, because the role of the rector is to give the voice to the students. The role is to advocate on behalf of the students on campus, in the court, and to the university management. And I don't really see how that would be a contradictory position. It's to open doors for students, it's to advocate on their behalf, and it ultimately is to represent constituents, which is the first job of any parliamentarian. There are often challenging situations where people might not agree, but the art of the role is to disagree in a friendly and constructive way. We're not always going to agree on everything. I've mentioned before, there's been plenty of campaigns I've run which have been on a cross-party basis, on a collegiate basis.
Thank you, Paul. That's your time. Thank you. Moving to Susie for your last question. Rory Mullen has said that most rectors are significantly established or leaders in their fields. What qualifies you, not that there is a qualification for this role, to undertake representation of the students?
Look, see, at the end of the day, my life will just get busier if I become rector, right? That's it. It won't actually affect my life or impact on my job. My job is going out, talking to people, getting to know people, and ultimately, I think personally, my whole life, I've defended people and stuck up for people, and that's what I'm willing to do. Am I a person of greatness in my field? I don't know. I'm a multi-award winning stand-up comedian that's done national television. So as that goes, I'm doing all right in that. I've been an estimating manager and director for multi-million-pound businesses. I done all right in that. And I was no bad at running a gay bar during the Section 28 campaign. So you know what? I'm willing to give this a bash and stick up for the students. But maybe I can't save somebody's life or take it to a political floor. But what I can do is challenge the status quo. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. And coming to Joseph for the last question of the night. A student has asked what Lady Rita Ray has actually achieved in her 3-year tenure as rector and why she feels she needs a second term. So your time starts now.
So Lady Rita Ray has achieved what she set out to achieve, and that's helping the students. She hasn't set out to achieve political gain for herself, increasing the name of her notoriety. She's set out to achieve help for individual students. She said personally that if she could help students, that's all she cares about. And I've seen from the evidence from myself and from other people that this is what she needs. She's not going to be doing any big bombastic claims, but what she's done is she's helped students on an individual level, raised their issues to court, and done the role as best she could.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you all for being so engaged with the questions. That brings our questioning for the night to a close. So I'll invite you all to give your 3 minutes closing remarks. And if we could go in the order of Susie, Paul, Joseph, and Doncho. So Susie, whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
This is a massive honour to be asked to stand as a rectorial candidate for this university. Like you've already found out about me, I've not been to university. This was a magical place on a hill that I was told that I couldn't reach because of this voice and my socio-economic background. See, at the end of the day, that's something that I never got the chance to experience. Probably when being a student was a lot better than what it was. But I believe in the University of Glasgow because it's dominated the skyline of a city that I love for my entire life. And I believe in the students because I do think you've had it harder than any generation. And I do think you need a strong voice. And I do think you need somebody who's not part of that establishment to come in and stick up for you. But most importantly, I want to make you proud. I want to make you proud because no matter where you've come from or your socioeconomic background, you have worked incredibly hard to get into that university. And whatever you leave with, whatever standard of degree or however long you stay at that uni, I want you to be proud of the fact that you got to that uni and you achieved your education at that university. It's a top 100. It's top 4 in the UK. Be proud. You've achieved something. You've done something during some of the hardest times, whether it be a global financial meltdown or a global pandemic or culture wars and polarisation within the world that you live in. You've actually done something, you've achieved something, and you should wear that degree with honour because they don't give those degrees out lightly and they don't let you in there easily. So congratulations on getting there. Hopefully you'll vote for me to be your rector. Hopefully I'll make you proud that I'm your rector. And hopefully you'll be proud that you went to the University of Glasgow. But whatever you do, all the best, and I'll see you around campus, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Take care. See you later.
Thanks so much, Susie. With a minute to spare there, you're helping us get back on track with time. Paul, if I could move to you for your closing remarks, your time starts now.
Thanks very much, Hailie. And, it's just been a really great honour to be nominated by the students as a candidate in this rectoral contest. And just thanks to all the students who have taken the time to come along and attend us tonight, and indeed for the chair's work in corralling us all. I also just want to thank Susie and the representatives of the other candidates for coming along and expressing how they'd approach the role of rector. I think we have a really strong field of candidates who would all bring excellent attributes to the role in their own ways. But for me, what I'm offering is a focus, a relentless focus on being active and present on campus, and with a track record of delivering social and economic justice for people in Glasgow. It's good to see democracy alive and well at the university, but we have to take cognizance that the role of rector is something that, if it isn't maintained as visible and present and meeting people where they're at as students on campus, it can quickly become irrelevant. And having a rector with next to no visibility on campus in recent years, students badly need someone who will be present and active. Students need someone with a track record of getting things done in the city and with the capacity and wherewithal and gumption to take forward their issues to the highest levels of management and indeed, if necessary, to Scottish ministers. Certainly, I've led many campaigns for social and economic justice in Glasgow, and I would bring that experience to the role as a campaigning rector, ready and willing to serve the needs of students, to be visible and reactive to your needs. I saw what a campaigning rector can do for students. The late Charles Kennedy, in my view, was a role model as rector, and the key to his success was being present and over time raising the awareness of his role on campus as rector. He was always present, always available, and eager to serve students and work cross campus to build solidarity. At the end of the day, most students actually don't know that they have a rector. They don't know that they have a champion there. First and foremost, I'd seek to raise the profile of rector so that students know someone is fighting their corner. At present, there are a number of critical issues impacting students day in and day out. We know that there's a housing emergency in Glasgow. Students are bearing the brunt of that rentier model that we need to break and channel that revenue into something that can produce greater justice for people in Glasgow. We know that student welfare and mental health cuts are having a big impact. Glasgow University students face some of the longest waits for access to mental health care of any university in the country. And we also need to build staff-student solidarity, which has been under a lot of pressure in recent years. An absent rector will mean these issues are simply not going to be heard at the university court and will not be escalated where they need to be at the heart of the power structures of the university and indeed the country. Students can't afford this. A vote for me is to make sure that a vote will represent the concerns of students as rector and are always voiced at the highest level.
Thank you, Paul. Moving on to you, Joseph, on behalf of Lady Rita Ray. Your 3 minutes start now.
Lady Ray would like me to first off start by thanking everyone for being here tonight, for Hailie for moderating this, and also for all the other candidates and the proposers for showing up and showing their support and putting on a nice, fair and fun, almost, I'd say, hustings. She's also asked me to keep my closing remarks short, so I'll try my best to do that. Lady Ray broke barriers in her personal career, and she wants to support students when they're doing that in their career as well. She sees the role not as something that is political, not as something that is for her to achieve, not as for something for, in 3 more years' time, people to be like, wow, that's Lady Rita Ray. She wants it to be a role in which she can do the one thing that she wants to do, and that is support the students and support them well. She will do it with her widening participation to help provide students with some of the supports that she didn't have when she was attending Glasgow Uni back in the day. She'd also do it with the gender equality to help create a culture that is still more gender equal and continue the work that she's done over the past 3 years, and also to support student safety. This is a campaign that we all support throughout the university and something that she highlights as one of her most important. Lady Ray is not going to be a political rector. She is going to be an impartial rector. She's going to use her role that she's done over the past 3 years and also in her life body of work of being impartial as a judge, and use that as a way in which any student from any belief and any background on campus can feel that Rita Ray will listen to their complaints, listen to their questions, listen to their concerns, and feel heard by their concerns and feel that she cares about their concerns. She'll be open 24 hours a day almost. She's got her email, she's got her phone. She'll be doing what she's done over the past 3 years. If students want to contact her, they'll be feel more than welcome. And she'll continue the great working relationships she has with university staff. She's not confrontational, she's not against it. She puts a hard line when it's needed, but she works well to get the best result for us, the students, and that's what she hopes to do. So it goes by finishing saying, please vote for Lady Ray to continue the great work that she's done so far.
Thank you, Joseph. And finally to Doncho.
Okay. First of all, I would like to apologize on behalf of Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah. Unfortunately, sometimes with this job and this profession, last minute things do come up. But I think what this evening has proved is that students want a political rector. The type of questions that we've heard, whether it's about divestment, about opposing the genocidal assault on Gaza, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's protecting reproductive rights for women, whether it's anti-racism or action on Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, these are political questions, and make no mistake about it. And the only candidate who is actually willing and able to carry through these political arguments is Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah. When speaking to students, when he was here on Friday, and when I was personally speaking to students when leafleting this morning, the majority of them are not even aware that there is a rector or what that position does. And so it's absolutely clear that these students need a champion. Students across the board do not feel like they're being listened to by this university, whether it's divestment, whether it's the Green New Deal, whatever it might be. We need a political champion that can take forward these arguments. We also need to ensure that this institution is not complicit in genocide and owning shares in weapons companies that are providing weapons for Israel to carry this genocide is complicity in genocide. We are an educational institution that has produced many great advances in medicine. We have produced many great thinkers, and we are producing quality educators now. And we need to ensure that this is the legacy of the union, that there isn't blood on this university's hands. And I would just like to say that this is absolutely in the spirit of this university to elect political rectors, as we did with Winnie Mandela back in the 80s, who was a prominent anti-apartheid South African activist. And for our generation, Palestine is the struggle against racism, apartheid, and imperialism. And if we want to disrupt that system, we have to start from our institutions. And that means a full divestment and a political rector that is able to recognize what is at the root of student issues, which is the commodification of universities. And this is also at the heart of the really failed industrial relations between the staff and the university. So what we have in Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah is a campaign that is powered absolutely by students. No other campaign has managed to draw this many people, and it's so popular. And we have this unique opportunity of electing not just someone who can be a political voice and a political message, but someone who wants to be and will be a working rector, who is absolutely...
Sancho, that's your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much to our candidates for their closing statements and for being good-natured and open in your answers. It's certainly been an interesting one. A thank you as well to our audience for sending in their questions. I think it's fair to say they've given you all a sufficient grilling. A reminder to our audience, if you're still watching along, that voting opens at 9 on Monday, the 25th of March, and closes at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 26th. All registered students are eligible to vote, and you can vote via the UofG Life app. That's all from me tonight and from our candidates. So again, just a massive thank you and good night.
Thank you.